Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the stories history left behind. Let's begin.
Okay, let's unpack this. For those of you who are into architecture, history, and maybe a touch of the deeply bizarre, we have an absolute anomaly for you today. We've been handed this huge stack of sources, old newspaper clippings, dedicated architectural studies, modern historical research, and it's all centered on one single massive structure in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the Greenwood Cemetery Mausoleum.
Anomaly is exactly the right word for it. I mean, the sources all describe a structure so unexpected for its time and place, so grand that it really does feel like it was just dropped in from another world.
Right.
So our mission today is to try and understand how this massive granite building, which was designed to look like a temple for the pharaohs, ended up on a quiet hillside in, early 20th century Pennsylvania.
And what was driving it? The cultural stuff, the technology, the spiritual side of it. Our goal is to really get into the symbolism, the specific funerary function, and what I think is maybe the most interesting part, the technology that was actually built into this monument.
Yeah.
We want to figure out what this colossal tomb tells us about civic ambition and, how people in 1915 Lancaster thought about mortality.
It's a phenomenal cultural document, just preserved in granite. You have this perfect storm of the early 20th century's obsession with permanence, the absolute height of the Egyptian revival style and funerary architecture. And then you throw in the rise of serious public health and sanitation concerns, and of course, this very deep-seated traditional Christian faith.
So it's a melting pot.
It's a true melting pot of ideas, yeah, all squeezed into one massive building.
So let's set the scene for you, because the location and that first moment you see it, it's crucial to getting why this thing had such an impact. Imagine you're driving through Lancaster City. You might be near the historic district. Maybe you're passing some of those typical brick homes, and then all of a sudden you see it. High atop the rolling grounds of Greenwood Cemetery, just commanding the landscape right above the curve of the Conestoga River, stands this 140-foot-long relic.
And the reaction right from the start was immediate. It was defining. The structure was instantly nicknamed Lancaster's Westminster Abbey.
Wow.
And that's not just some, casual comparison. That nickname tells you everything about the perceived importance and the sheer civic weight of this thing when it was dedicated in 1915.
So it was meant to be a local landmark, something to rival the great historical monuments of Europe.
Absolutely. It was intended, right from the drawing board, to be a final resting place for the city's most prominent families. The industrialists, the civic leaders, people who are looking for that ultimate statement of lasting dignity.
And when you approach it, that initial feeling described in the sources is just one of disbelief.
Right, because you're conditioned to expect something else. You think, okay, Victorian cemetery, maybe some ornate ironwork, marble angels, the usual obelisks. But instead, you're hit with this massive, almost windowless wall of polished granite that genuinely looks like it belongs on the banks of the Nile.
It's silent. It's huge, and it's completely out of context.
Completely. And that sudden visual shock, that feeling of awe, that was the absolute goal of the design.
Okay, let's get into the details, because we have to start with the sheer scale of this thing. This isn't just some small family vault tucked away on a hillside. Structurally, it's a modern temple. What are we looking at dimensions-wise?
We are looking at a building. It's 140 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 40 feet tall. When the source calls it a massive pile of granite, that's not an exaggeration. The exterior is made of these huge, polished granite blocks.
And for 1915, the logistics of that alone must have been just monumental. This wasn't prefabricated concrete or anything. This was actual stone that had to be quarried, shaped, moved.
And then assembled with a whole lot of precision on top of a hill.
Absolutely. The weight and the complexity of moving those granite blocks, many of which had to be polished to get that smooth, refined look, it speaks to a really significant feat of early 20th century engineering and labor.
And the sources say the quality holds up.
Oh, yeah. More than 100 years later, the structure is still remarkably intact. It shows almost no signs of serious wear. It was built, and I mean this quite literally, to last for millennia, just like its ancient inspirations.
And the man behind this enduring monument was C. Emlen Urban, who was one of Lancaster's most defining architects.
Urban is a pivotal figure here. He designed a lot of the city's grandest, most recognizable civic buildings. So his name being attached to this immediately elevates it. It's not just a cemetery structure anymore. It's a genuine piece of municipal architecture, a high-profile commission.
And that high profile came with a serious price tag, which I think really helps us grasp the level of ambition here. The sources put the cost at around $85,000 in 1915, which is a staggering figure for a funerary project back then. To put that in perspective for you, if you adjust for inflation and the cost of construction materials and labor, we are talking about an investment of roughly $2.1 million today.
Wow. Okay, so that money wasn't just spent on permanence. It was spent on status.
Exactly. This wasn't just a few wealthy families buying a nice plot. This was a collective investment by the city's elite, all seeking a permanent legacy.
And that kind of investment needed a style that matched the ambition. That's where the Egyptian element comes in. The style is described as, quote, strictly Egyptian.
And that choice is so deliberate. By the 1910s, Egyptian revival architecture was the established way to signal permanence, to signal eternity.
Why Egypt, though?
Because ancient Egypt was the one culture in history that came closest to defeating time. Their structures were the oldest, the biggest, and they were built specifically to house the dead forever. So if you wanted your legacy to last, you copied the pharaohs.
We have this fantastic quote from a local paper covering the 1915 dedication, and it captures this feeling perfectly. It says, "A first glimpse causes one's thought to leap to old Egypt." So the effect was immediate. But then it goes deeper. It says, "The building was such a one as stood centuries ago along the River Nile, and whose ruins are there today as reminders of the care the ancient pharaohs and their nobles took to preserve their remains."
See, that connection is explicit. They were consciously drawing a direct line between the leading families of Lancaster and the noble class of ancient Egypt. It's an assertion of a kind of local aristocracy, of lasting influence. The mausoleum is basically shouting to the city, these people matter and they will always matter.
So let's look at the specific features Urban used to get that monumental effect. Besides just the sheer bulk of the granite, what are the details that define the Egyptian style here?
Well, it starts with the heavy geometry. The whole structure is framed by this massive stonework, especially around the central entrance, which has these enormous, imposing bronze doors. And then right above that entrance, there's a granite tower that rises up, giving it that vertical presence.
And the pillars. The use of pillars seems key to breaking up what would otherwise just be a giant gray box.
Precisely. The architect knew that a simple, massive granite box would just look brutalist and boring. So he included this really detailed arrangement of pillars. You've got 5 slender pillars set in front of 4 stained glass windows on that central tower. And then running along the front, there are 10 more pillars, 5 on each side of the main entrance.
10 pillars just to, as the sources put it, relieve the monotony of the rough granite. That tells you how much artistic calculation went into this. They wanted the weight, the permanence of the granite, but they needed those classical elements to keep it looking refined.
It's that blend, the imposing, heavy feel of antiquity mixed with the refined, classical details you'd expect in early 20th century architecture. It conveys dignity, permanence, and sophisticated taste all at once. It's a very intentional, highly structured design meant to maximize that sense of civic and historical importance.
So if that was all about the physical shock and the cost, now we get to dive into what I think is the really fascinating part, the complex symbolism. This mausoleum is, well, it's a study in purposeful contradiction. It blends ancient pagan references with explicit Christian doctrine.
And this symbolic synthesis is where the structure really shines as a cultural artifact. It's designed to be a threshold, a gate between the living and the dead, and that gate is guarded by the 2 most defining features on the outside, the granite sphinxes.
Right, the 2 granite sphinxes sitting in what the sources call solemn repose, flanking the entrance. They immediately tell you this is sacred ground guarded by mythic watchers. But what's really fascinating is how the sources point out that the design explicitly blends traditions from both Egyptian and Greek mythology.
This duality shows, I think, immense intellectual sophistication from the designers. They weren't just slapping down some Egyptian kitsch. They were using the full historical power of the Sphinx idea.
Okay, so let's break down those 2 traditions because their roles are traditionally pretty much opposites, right? In the West, we mostly know the Greek Sphinx.
Right. The Greek Sphinx, from the story of Oedipus, is typically female, treacherous, and totally merciless. She's the guardian known for posing impossible riddles and then killing and eating anyone who fails. She symbolizes danger, a kind of ferocious barrier. Using the Greek model is almost a threat. Do not violate this space.
A terrifying symbol, rooted in violence and an intellectual challenge. So how does that compare to the Egyptian model?
The Egyptian Sphinx is the complete opposite. It's a protective, benevolent figure, typically male, often associated with royalty and divine power. It represents the fierce strength of a lion combined with human intellect, but its job is protection. Egyptian sphinxes line the avenues to temples to guarantee the sanctity of the space for the gods or for the noble dead.
So by blending those two, the solemn, protective, male Egyptian guardian with the implied, ferocious, challenge-based strength of the Greek tradition, they created this incredibly formidable threshold.
Exactly. The pairing acts as a gate between this world and the next, drawing on both concepts. You have divine protection for the noble dead inside, ensuring their perpetual rest. But you also have this implicit warning to the living that this is an unassailable, sacred space. It signals that the people buried here are protected by forces both divine and ancient.
But as you said, this isn't a purely pagan temple, it's a Christian mausoleum. And the moment you get past those mythological guardians, you're hit with immediate, unmistakable Christian symbolism, mostly in the stained glass. This is where that blend really takes hold.
The stained glass is there to provide the necessary theological assurance of resurrection, which was, paramount for the Christian families buying these crypts. And the most crucial funerary symbol they used, and one that required careful handling, is the inverted torch.
And this symbol is everywhere, isn't it? It's in the 4 windows on the tower and in the 2 big windows at each end of the building. And the symbolism of a torch in funerary art is inherently dual.
Precisely. If the torch is pointing down with no flame, it means the extinction of earthly life. It's a symbol of mourning, of sorrow, literally snuffing out the light. But when a flame is pregnant and in stained glass, the light of the sun shining through often implies a flame. It signifies the fire of eternal life and the Christian belief in resurrection.
So the architect gives the families both things at once. The traditional somber recognition of loss with the inverted position, and the essential promise of faith with the implied flame.
It's an elegant piece of architectural compromise. It satisfies the need for traditional funerary art while firmly anchoring the building in the doctrine of the afterlife. And just to remove any doubt about where its ultimate allegiance lies, there's the most explicit symbol of all.
The cross of Calvary, right there in the stained glass transom, right above those huge bronze doors.
And that cross makes the spiritual message totally unambiguous. You're looking at a structure built with the geological permanence of the pharaohs, but it's dedicated absolutely to the Christian doctrine of physical death, followed by spiritual rebirth.
So when you zoom out, this whole blend of pagan references, the Egyptian style, the sphinxes with that explicit Christian iconography, it reflects this really powerful cultural ambition in the early 20th century. They wanted their status and their physical bodies to last forever, but they needed the building to also confirm their ticket to heaven.
Yes. They were essentially trying to harness all forms of permanence, mythological, physical, and spiritual. It was an era obsessed with legacy and physical durability, all driven by this new industrial wealth. The architecture had to accommodate the grand scale of that wealth while still sticking to the conservative spiritual expectations of the community. And they achieved that balance by having the outside speak of ancient, unmoving time and the inside promise salvation.
Okay, so let's use those magnificent bronze doors as our threshold and step inside. The description of the interior suggests that the opulence did not stop with the granite exterior. It was a fully realized, luxurious chapel space.
Oh, absolutely. It was designed for solemnity and grandeur. The floor is beautifully tiled, but the defining feature is the interior finish. It is entirely Vermont marble. This is a premium material, it's something you'd associate with a high-end bank or a state capitol building. It was chosen for its dazzling finish, its cleanliness, and its inherent permanence.
And the ceiling is described as reinforced concrete, which was then painted and frescoed. And there's that tension again. The absolute latest in engineering material, reinforced concrete, used to support one of the oldest artistic traditions, frescoing.
That marriage of technology and art is so key to the early 20th century. The corridors themselves were not just hallways lined with tombs. They were meant to be a chapel space where the final services and last rites for the interred would always be held. The whole environment was built for high-status ceremonies.
And the visual centerpieces inside are those stained glass windows. The 2 main ones on the east side depict very specific, comforting scenes for the grieving families.
One shows Christ beckoning the soul to rest, which is that traditional, reassuring image of a safe passage to the afterlife. The second one depicts the ever-flowing river of life, which reinforces themes of continuity and eternal existence. And our sources suggest these windows were likely made by the esteemed Rudy brothers, which is another sign that they spared no expense on the artistic quality inside.
Okay, let's talk capacity. This wasn't just for one rich family. It was a community repository for the wealthy elite. It needed to be highly organized and hold hundreds of remains.
It was a substantial operation. The longitudinal aisles are 10 feet wide, which allows for dignified processions and space for multiple families to gather without it feeling crowded. The total capacity is 360 individual crypts, which line the sides of the two main corridors. Each one had an entrance slab for inscriptions, and, very importantly, they were all individually numbered for clear record-keeping.
But they also catered to entire families, right? Offering more permanent private solution.
Yes, at the intersections of the corridors, you find 10 larger family compartments. These were the real status symbols inside the building. They were secured by private bronze doors and grilles. Each of these compartments held 6 crypts, so they were expressly intended for an entire family to rest together. They were like exclusive, multi-generational estates within the larger monument.
And here's a detail that I just find utterly endearing in its contradiction. The builders, using the best science, the strongest granite, modern engineering, they still had to bow to ancient human superstition.
The omission of crypt number 13, the sources explicitly state this was done in deference to a popular superstition.
Okay.
Can you imagine that meeting? The architects, the engineers, the financiers deciding where to put their $85,000, ensuring state-of-the-art sanitation. And still, they wouldn't risk selling the 13th spot.
It's just a perfect snapshot of the era, isn't it? You have this rational push for scientific progress, but right alongside it is this deep, immovable layer of psychological fear. They just skipped number 13 because even the richest, most educated citizens of Lancaster were not immune to triskaidekaphobia.
It's a wonderful reminder that superstition often dictates human design, even in monuments to logic and permanence, and it probably didn't hurt sales either. They were selling dignity, permanence, and psychological comfort.
Speaking of sales, these spaces were a significant investment. The individual crypts back in 1915 went for between $200 and $300.
Right, which adjusted for today is between $5,000 and $7,500. For a final resting place, it was a clear investment in high-status, permanent memorialization. It really solidifies that Westminster Abbey nickname for the city's elite.
But the real deep dive here, the technological achievement that truly separates this mausoleum from its ancient Egyptian inspirations, is the intense focus on sanitation and air quality.
This is critical because historically, community mausoleums had a serious PR problem when it came to hygiene and odor control. The early 20th century was obsessed with public health, and this building had to meet those anxieties head on. It was a necessary engineering challenge.
It was. The builders had to merge aesthetics with contemporary public health technology to create a space that was not just beautiful, but long-lasting, odorless, and sanitary.
So they developed this sophisticated ventilation system, which the sources describe as automatic and effective. But the genius isn't just that it ventilates, it's how it ventilates.
The key innovation was decentralization. The air system wasn't for the building as a whole. Instead, each individual crypt had its own separate inlet and outlet for air to pass through. This meant that any biological process was immediately and individually ventilated, ensuring superior air quality right at the source and preventing any buildup in the main chapel area.
That sounds incredibly complex and expensive to implement, but it shows a real commitment to the comfort and confidence of the families visiting. It does. But the final hurdle was odor control, which was the thing that often caused public resistance to these kinds of buildings. Just moving air around wasn't enough. They had to treat it.
And the solution they used sounds very chemical and very practical for the time. All the air was designed to flow over chloride of lime.
Chloride of lime is basically bleaching powder, calcium hypochlorite. In the early 1900s, it was one of the most widely used and trusted disinfectants and deodorizers around. It was used in public health for water purification, general sanitation, everything. So using it here, integrated right into the ventilation system, was the ultimate practical solution.
And this chemical treatment was designed to, quote, ensure a thorough absence of all offensive odors. It perfectly shows how modern anxieties about hygiene and public health were solved with the best available chemical technology, integrated seamlessly into a monument that looked ancient. They were offering the enduring dignity of Egypt combined with the cutting-edge sanitation of 1915.
And to really appreciate the mausoleum, we have to step back and place it in its setting, Greenwood Cemetery and the broader trends of 19th and early 20th century American landscape architecture.
Right. Greenwood's history is extensive. It was chartered in 1895, which is relatively late in the rural cemetery movement, and it covers 48 acres of rolling ground right off South Queen Street.
The original layout, designed by D.M. Rothenberger, it adheres to that rural cemetery tradition. This was a movement that sought to move burial grounds out of crowded, often unsanitary city churchyards and into these beautiful park-like settings, places with winding paths, extensive plantings, tranquil lawns. They were intended to be places for reflection and public recreation, not just for burial.
And the organization of the space itself ties right into local civic history. The sections are named after famous local Americans: Buchanan, Fulton, and General Reynolds, a map of local heroes. And the mausoleum stands in the Buchanan section.
But the most significant detail about its context is its specific elevation. The structure occupies the absolute highest point in Greenwood Cemetery.
And that placement, overlooking miles of country and the Conestoga River, was not an accident. That was a core principle of memorial design back then.
Absolutely. It reinforces several key ideas. First, it ensures visual dominance, making it a landmark. Second, spiritually, the high ground reinforces the concept of ascent, of lasting remembrance. It separates the noble dead from the bustle of the world below. It literally elevates their status.
I can just imagine the architect arguing that the highest point was the only suitable place for a monument trying to capture the scale of a pharaoh's tomb.
Precisely. It gives the structure a dominance that an identical building lower on the slope would just lack. But the mausoleum didn't just appear out of nowhere. Greenwood already had this climate of architectural ambition shown by several impressive existing structures: stone gatehouse, a chapel, and a really significant crematorium.
And the presence of that crematorium is critical to understanding Lancaster's really nuanced approach to memorialization back then. This wasn't a modern addition.
No, it was built in 1884, and that detail gives Greenwood a unique place in U.S. funerary history. It's described as the second oldest crematorium in the entire country.
The second oldest. That puts Lancaster at the absolute cutting edge of the burial reform movement.
It does. And notably, it was the first crematorium in the country that was open to the general public. Cremation was highly controversial in the 1880s. It was viewed with skepticism, sometimes outright opposition, by traditional religious groups. The fact that Lancaster not only built one so early, but opened it to the public, that indicates a profoundly progressive and modernizing attitude toward death.
So on one hand, Lancaster is this progressive pioneer in cremation, embracing the new scientific method of disposal. But then, just 3 decades later, they pour the equivalent of millions into building this massive, permanent granite mausoleum for traditional entombment.
It creates this fascinating tension. It speaks to a community that was grappling with modernization and tradition at the same time. They were willing to provide the scientific, progressive option cremation while still offering the ultimate expression of traditional, eternal permanence for those who could afford it. The Greenwood Mausoleum became the architectural, lasting symbol of that latter choice, the desire to conquer time by sheer mass and durability.
It's the ultimate have-your-cake-and-eat-it-too approach to death. If you want to be scattered, we have a state-of-the-art crematorium. If you want to be preserved like a pharaoh, we have a $2.1 million granite temple waiting for you.
And that duality really confirms the complexity of Lancaster's civic identity at the time. Proud, wealthy, traditional, but also open to scientific advancement.
So let's talk about the mausoleum's enduring presence in Lancaster today, more than a century later. That nickname, Lancaster's Westminster Abbey, clearly stuck for a reason.
It endured because the building lived up to its promise. It's the most prominent structure in the cemetery, and it houses the remains of the city's influential elite, the nobles who shaped Lancaster's history. It is a genuine municipal monument, a silent archive of the city's industrial age.
And it's a testament to see Emlen Urban's design and the quality of the granite that it's still so intact. You said it was built for eternity, and so far, so good. But its current status adds this layer of quiet, almost Gothic mystery.
It does, despite all that expense poured into the interior. The Vermont marble, the frescoed ceilings, the stained glass, the mausoleum is currently locked. It's inaccessible to the public.
And we're told the closest most visitors today will ever get to seeing that interior splendor is a narrow view through the oversized keyhole.
That small detail is haunting, isn't it? The building, designed for solemn public ceremony and reverence, has essentially withdrawn into itself. It just stands in this silent, sealed vigil on top of the hill, leaving all the grandeur of its internal craftsmanship completely to your imagination. The experience becomes one of just exterior contemplation and curiosity about what's sealed behind those bronze doors.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it connects this very local wonder to a much broader commercial and architectural trend across the region. The Lancaster Mausoleum, despite its monumental status, is not unique.
What's fascinating here is that it has a near-identical twin located just across the Susquehanna River in York, Pennsylvania.
Two colossal Egyptian Revival community mausoleums, both completed in the same year, 1915, separated by about 20 miles. This takes it out of the realm of just local genius and puts it into the realm of standardized industrial architecture.
The York Mausoleum is in Prospect Hill Cemetery, and just like Greenwood's, it has its own pair of solemn sphinxes and identical architectural features, including stained glass windows that were also sourced from the Rudy brothers.
And the sources reveal the commercial secret behind these twins.
Yeah.
Both buildings share patents from the American Mausoleum Company. This is a crucial detail. While C. Emlen Urban certainly oversaw the local Lancaster design, the foundational concept, the engineering template, the structural patents, they were standardized.
Which tells us that the desire for these monumental Egyptian-style community mausoleums wasn't some singular eccentricity of Lancaster's wealthy. It was a successful, patented architectural package being sold commercially to wealthy, ambitious cities across the United States. It was marketed as the definitive, sanitary, permanent resting place.
It was a brand. And the fact that this highly engineered, symbolically rich $2 million design was essentially a repeatable kit, it speaks volumes about the commercialization of eternal dignity in that era.
It shows that American industry could commodify even the deepest human desires for legacy and permanence just by wrapping modern engineering, like that ventilation system, in the aesthetic of timeless antiquity.
And there's one key difference between the two twins that offers a great opportunity for those of you who want to experience the interior splendor that is locked away in Lancaster.
Unlike Greenwood, whose bronze doors stay sealed, the Prospect Hill location in York does occasionally offer guided tours. This gives you a rare chance to step inside a functional, preserved building of this specific patented design era, to walk across that tiled floor, admire the Vermont marble, look up at the frescoed ceilings, and really see the relationship between the 360 crypts and the family compartments.
So that near-identical structure is effectively a portal back to 1915. It allows us to see exactly what the prominent Lancaster families paid $85,000 to achieve in their own community. It's the closest most of us will ever get to feeling the true scale of that Egyptian ambition. So what does this all mean when we bring it back to you, the learner? The Greenwood Mausoleum is so much more than just a magnificent building. It is a stunning microcosm of early 20th century culture, ambition, and contradiction.
It reveals a culture that was simultaneously using ancient mythological power, the sphinxes, the Egyptian architecture, with cutting-edge modern technology like chloride of lime sanitation and reinforced concrete. It perfectly captures that period of immense civic wealth and the desire to build monuments that would truly defy time, standing as a testament to the belief that status should endure forever. It stands quite literally as a place where memory, myth, and engineering touch.
It's the ultimate expression of that desire for permanence, designed to secure the legacy of Lancaster's leading families in a style that went beyond local history and reached all the way back to the time of the pharaohs, while using the latest in public health science.
For those of you intrigued enough to see this historical anomaly for yourself, the mausoleum is located at 719 Highland Avenue in Greenwood Cemetery. The grounds are open from dawn to dusk, and while the interior is locked, its commanding view over the city and the silent, imposing presence of those granite sphinxes make it an excellent site for quiet contemplation and photography.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to carry forward as you reflect on this magnificent structure. The Greenwood Mausoleum was built on the premise of absolute physical permanence. Yet, as we established, the very same cemetery was a pioneer in cremation, which is the defining modern trend in memorialization today, a trend toward dispersal, sustainability, and digital remembrance rather than massive granite structures. So considering that modern shift, what will be the lasting architectural or technological monuments of memorialization a century from now, designed to secure a person's legacy? Will they be physical structures at all? Or will the desire for permanence shift entirely into the digital realm? And if so, what surprising technological detail will our descendants find inside them?
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.